Hello. Today I wanted to talk about King Lear. Um, and much like my discussion on Hamlet, I do feel King Lear is a document of consciousness, changing consciousness from ego consciousness to soul consciousness or God consciousness. Um, so I guess I'll start on the ego side. So it does seem like the villains of the play. So we're talking about Edmund, Goneril, Regan, Cornwall, Oswald. They're all acting out of ego and acting out of vices that the ego is susceptible to. Um, but first, actually, I would like to start with King Lear himself. So, in the beginning of the play, King Lear asks his three daughters, "How much do you love me?" And that seems to be a quality of ego: is how am I affected? Love is not directed outwardly towards others, but it's directed towards oneself. Little s, not big S, big self, like as in the soul. So Lear again asks his three daughters, "How much do you love me?" And dependent upon their response, he's going to give them a dowry. So that's money, title, land. So if they give answers he likes, they will receive a reward. They will receive his love. Um, and if not, then they will receive nothing. So Goneril and Regan, of course, profess their love. We can tell it's a false love. They're doing it only to obtain property, position, title, uh, money, things like that. And Cordelia does not. She feels that this whole thing, this "how much do you love me and I will give you a dowry based upon your love," she feels it's a masquerade. It's completely false. Um, it's not about true love at all. So in with regards to money, if you throughout that particular scene, you do see the word tender. Um, and that could mean, that a tenderness, a quality of love. But what I think the double meaning, I think the other meaning, what Shakespeare's trying to say is legal tender, like money. That Lear and especially Goneril and Regan are expressing their love through some sort of exchange. Like it's an exchange of quantity, of material quantity. You demonstrate your love by giving more money, giving more property, things like that. Even though their hearts may be devoid of true love. So I think what Shakespeare is saying is that it's not real love. It's love based upon material things, material wants, material desires, things like that. Comparison. It does seem to be, all of us in ego nature. We've compared ourselves to others. Edmund in his monologues talks about how even though he's a bastard, that he is just as good as Edgar, and maybe even better in some instances. So again, there's a comparison going on. And Goneril and Regan too, when they're professing their love to King Lear, especially Regan, she's saying, "Well, my love is actually greater than Goneril's." So again, being in ego nature, one tends to compare a lot. A lot of the villains are acting out of vice. Ego seems to be more susceptible to vice, to anger, greed, lust, the need for power. So all of those characters act out of vice. So the characters meaning Goneril, Regan, Cornwall, Edmund, Oswald. Um, they are acting out of one of those vices or many of those vices. Again, much like in Macbeth, Macbeth was willing to commit any act up to killing Duncan because of his desire for power or position. And that is the same with Edmund and Goneril and Regan and Cornwall. So Goneril and Regan are willing to do horrible things to others, and eventually Goneril poisons Regan, kills her for the affection of Edmund. And Cornwall, Regan's husband, plucks out the eyes of Gloucester. Right? And Edmund, he's willing to have his father killed, his brother Edgar killed, Lear killed, Cordelia killed. So really, in ego nature, it does seem like it's difficult to love truly. That seems to be the message of King Lear. And that love is found, true love is found through the soul. And we'll talk about the soul in a little bit. So back to Edmund. Edmund, the gods are mentioned frequently in King Lear, and nature is Edmund's goddess. So, and I think what he means is really survival of the fittest. I can survive in this world by any means necessary, whether that's killing someone, whether that's taking advantage of someone, lying to someone, being manipulative to someone. So it's kind of the Machiavellian attitude towards life. And pride is definitely another quality that affects all of them, but especially Lear. Lear, as it's mentioned in the play, since childhood is really doted upon, is yesed to a lot. So anything that thwarts whatever he wants, he goes into a rage. So these are some of the qualities of ego, some of the aspects of ego that seem to apply to the villains of the play. So let's talk about soul. So with soul, we're talking about Lear, although Lear starts out in ego consciousness. Through suffering, transfers into soul consciousness. So one aspect about soul consciousness, it does seem to involve suffering. So we all have our egos, we all have an ego nature, we all have desires and wants. And if those are thwarted, we suffer in some degree. So if we act negatively towards our thwarted desires, we have more suffering. If we have a positive attitude, there still may be suffering, but it's to a less degree. So Shakespeare in King Lear seems to state to change your consciousness, to change from ego to soul, suffering is involved. Suffering seems to be the best means to learn, to become aware of one's self and of others. Another quality that those characters demonstrate is love of other. Cordelia in the beginning, doesn't even want to speak. She feels like the life I've lived and my attitude towards you, King Lear, has been one of love. And she probably has the most succinct statement about love. She says, well, what should I do? Love and be silent. Really feel my love and not profess my love through words. That is akin to be still and know that I am God. And really a manifestation of God consciousness is love consciousness. So that statement could be an allusion to Psalm 46:10. And again, that is an allusion to yoga. The more I read the dramas, they do seem to be treatises on yoga, how to unite your ego consciousness with soul consciousness, which then unites you to God consciousness. So love is a quality of soul consciousness, genuine feeling love. That's immaterial as opposed to material or conditioned love, like we discussed in ego consciousness. Another quality, especially with Kent and with Edgar, they seem to want to serve others, help others. Kent says, essentially, my whole life is nothing but a pawn for you, Lear, to be used as you wish, but in your best interest. So he does confront Lear. He says, Lear, banishing Cordelia and giving all of your resources and titles to your two daughters, you're not doing right. You're doing wrong. And so he does speak truth to him to help him to see exactly what he's doing. And Edgar, with his father Gloucester, tries to assist him through his suffering after his blinding, after Gloucester's eyes were plucked out by Cornwall. Ridding oneself of identification with ego. That is another thing that one must try to do to gain soul consciousness. And I think Shakespeare does this with Edgar and Kent in particular in their disguising. Right? They both have to not be themselves and become someone else. I'm forgetting the character name, but Kent becomes another character and Edgar becomes poor Tom. So I think perhaps what Shakespeare is doing there from a spiritual point of view is ridding oneself of ego identification. Edgar even says something like, Edgar, I nothing am. So again, I am not the ego. I am not Edgar. I am something else. Speaking of nothing, nothing is a word that is used throughout the play. Nothing, nothingness. I think what that means is a renouncement of external things, but it's also nothingness of the mind. And I think by nothingness, it means really not being motivated by or influenced by moods, wants, desires, ambitions, selfish ambitions of the world. I think this is what Shakespeare means by nothingness. It is trying to overcome all of those things so that really the only thing that exists is love. It's a silent mind, meaning not being buffeted about by all of those negative things, wants, desires, likes, dislikes, things like that. Gloucester actually does reference, he does say, I renounce the world after he is blinded. He, through perhaps a negative mindset, he does say, I renounce the world. I want nothing from the world anymore. And he says, when I saw, I didn't see the world correctly. And now that I am blind, I see it feelingly. Again, Shakespeare is referencing that feeling. And again, this isn't emotion, but it's more of it's a pure feeling, instinctual, pure feeling that eventually leads to intuition, which then leads to soul consciousness, which then leads to God consciousness. When Lear is coming out of his kind of the tempest of his mind, and he meets Cordelia, he says to her, thou art a soul in bliss. And a soul in bliss, from the point of view of consciousness, is the highest state of consciousness. To be a soul, you recognize your own divinity, you recognize the divinity in others, and you're in a state of bliss, in a state of love, divine love. He says, do not take me out of my grave. And so, of course, the literal reading would be, "Don't take me out of my death." But the spiritual meaning is, "Don't, yeah, take." Grave would be taking me out of uh, ego consciousness. Ego consciousness is dead to soul consciousness. Really, the ego's world is the material world. Uh, the divine world, the soul, interacts with the divine world and divine qualities, whereas the ego interacts with the material world and usually negative qualities. Balance, again, like I mentioned in the Hamlet video, Kent and Cordelia seem to be exemplars of this. Um, it's not too much, it's not too little. You are in truth, or you are living correctly if you are balanced, if you aren't doing something too much. Now, Kent himself is perhaps blunt too much, and that leads to suffering. So, again, it seems like whenever one is out of balance, and this is for the villains and for the heroes, suffering ensues. And so you suffer to learn something, to behave differently, to have a different attitude, to have a different mentality. The fool, and how the fool connects to soul consciousness, he seems to be practical. All of the wisdom that comes out of the fool is actually very practical. So that in order to achieve soul consciousness and our relationship to the world, it does have to be practical. It has to be balanced. It has to be practical. You have to have common sense. That is a piece of raising your consciousness. Patience is another quality. Patience seems to be a quality that the Shakespeare writer and writers talk about a lot in all of their plays, especially the dramas and especially in King Lear. So that patience is a requirement, is a necessity for evolving your consciousness. So it's probably patience with others, it's patience with what you're going through internally, it's patience with suffering. So patience. I just want to read a quote that comes from Albany. Albany says, "If that the heavens do not their visible spirits send quickly down to tame these wild offenses, it will come. Humanity must perforce prey on itself like monsters of the deep." Again, so these monsters of the deep are the negative qualities that are insatiable. And eventually, what these negative qualities, when we act out of them, although they may be pleasing in the beginning, what it eventually does is destroy us, either physically, mentally, or spiritually. So, that's, I think, what Shakespeare is referencing through Albany. The visible spirits are people, so people that do act out of that help us along the way, but it's also the visible spirits of the positive qualities. So patience, love, compassion, service, many wisdom, many other qualities that help us lead spiritual lives, happier lives. So I think King Lear can be summed up really in selfish love wants, selfless love gives, is concerned for other, whereas selfish love is concerned for the ego self. So, and of course, this has resonance with, again, it has resonance with the Bible, with the Bhagavad Gita, with the Quran, with other great spiritual documents of the world. So I guess I'll leave it there. Those are some of my thoughts on King Lear. Let me know what you think in the comments. What are some of your thoughts or ideas about King Lear? What is Shakespeare trying to say to us with King Lear? Thank you. Bye.